Welcome to The Spotlight, the podcast where veterans and military spouses connect and share how their military experience has transformed their lives and their businesses. Here's your host, Bob Louthen.
Hey, this is your host, Bob Louthen, founder of the VeteranCrowd Network, the network that brings veterans and veteran-led businesses together with each other and the resources they need to prosper. And you are tuning into The Spotlight. Hey, welcome everybody to The Spotlight. This is your host, Bob Louthen. Very pleased today, going to get into an interesting topic about investing into democracy. We've got with us today our guest, Julie Cane and Rick Rikoski. Julie is the CEO of Democracy Investments. She is a former Naval Aviator, and Rick Rikoski is the chief economist of Democracy Investments, and he was a Marine roboticist. I'm going to ask him some questions about that at the Naval Surface Warfare Center. Julie and Rick, welcome to the program. Thank you for stepping into the spotlight.
Thanks for having us, Bob.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, so Julie, I'll start with you. And I have a question. What is Democracy Investments? Tell everybody what it is.
Democracy Investments is a mission-driven asset manager. We formed our company because we are upset about the global rise of authoritarianism and the financial vehicles that are passively investing in authoritarian countries. Democracy Investments has an exclusive license to the Economist Democracy Index, which we use as a very neutral overlay on an all-world ex-US index, so that the portfolio is reweighted towards securities in democratic countries and away from securities in authoritarian countries. Our hope is to incentivize democracy so that every country will want to improve their democracy score. And as capital starts to flow into our fund, we think it can be a very strong carrot and stick incentive for all countries to think about democracy and improving their scores.
This is a very interesting thing, and I want to get into the statistics on this. We met in a conversation, in a veterans group, and listened to you guys. But you and Rick kind of came up with some interesting statistics. I think this is statistically driven. So, Rick, as the chief economist, could you kind of talk a little bit about the numbers behind this, the theory behind it?
Sure. So at the most simple level, we're reweighing an all-world ex-US portfolio, where traditionally the portfolio components are proportional purely to the market cap of the particular companies. And instead, we combine them so that it's the product of their market cap and their democracy score. And what this means is that countries which are more democratic get more money, countries which are less democratic get less money. And more money in the system means that if you're a company and you're trying to raise capital, you have to essentially give up less stock to get the same amount of capital. And so you get higher economic growth. And so we expect to see greater economic growth of the democracies, diminished economic growth with the authoritarian states. Especially as we grow to scale and the amount of money we're pushing into the system increases. So Norway gets the biggest boost. They get to be about 31% above the baseline portfolio. Saudi Arabia takes the biggest haircut. They get reduced by 72%. So they only get 28% of what they would originally get. However, the Saudis gain the most if they start to take steps towards democracy. So that's sort of the underlying notion.
Talk a little bit about this democracy index. Could you explain a little bit more about that particular mechanism and the scoring?
Yes, the Economist has been tracking every country in the world since 2006 with 60 different indicators that roll up into themes such as functioning of government, electoral process, political participation, and civil liberties. And 10 is a perfect score, which no one has, but Norway has the top score, 9.6 or so. And all countries get a ranking between 0 to 10.
Bottom two countries are North Korea. They're the bottom, right? And then
they're setting the standard for poor performance, right?
Exactly.
but they're closely followed by the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And what's interesting is that countries fail in different ways. Clearly there's a big difference between life in the DRC and life in North Korea. But they're both terrible places to live.
Right. I mean, where would a country like Myanmar, has all the, military coup and so forth going on at this point? I'm not even sure, in the United States, you can't even invest in a country like that, right?
Yeah, I would expect they're down close to China, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, Myanmar there are 3, so they're slightly higher than China, but not much. And that doesn't account for their most recent coup. So they're probably
Let's talk about China for a second. You know, literally billions, maybe trillions of dollars have been invested into the Chinese economy, and yet we have this low scoring ratio, if you will. So we are supporting China in a way that perhaps we shouldn't be, right? And as an investor, I'm kind of uneducated to this shortcoming. I mean, how do we describe that?
Well, I think that the Chinese have very impressively run from being a communist state to a free market state, right? Free market state with a lot of government involvement, certainly. And while they've done that, the MSCI All World ex-US Index has significantly increased their Chinese holdings. I think they're up to 11 or 12% now of the global index. So more than 10% of your money when you're investing in an All World ex-US Index right now is going to China. Their free market reforms have not necessarily been mirrored in their political reforms. And maybe that will follow, maybe not. A lot of countries, though, have engaged in sort of a similar evolution, and it's a concern. And it's not, if you look at democracy scores globally, they're actually melting down the fastest in terms of a market cap, in terms of how dollars are invested. It's melting down the fastest actually in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. So there's a lot of places where we really need to worry about this. But what we need, I think, is more than what we had at the end of the Cold War. We said free markets lead to free societies. And I think that the China model has shown that it's possible to have a free market without necessarily having a free society. And I think we need additional pressures to push us towards free societies.
Hey, Julie, where did this idea come from? When did you guys meet, and when did it become an idea to create this democracy investments platform?
10 years ago, I was trying to figure out an impact investing play and watching the rise of ESG at my time at a big bank. And I couldn't figure out the right focus area that would have the kind of impact and measurable impact. Last summer, Rick and I met, and we were brainstorming on ways to help shift capital away from authoritarians, everything that Rick just described. And he had been modeling coronavirus death rates using the Economist Democracy Index. So it was Rick's idea. Why don't we just use that as an overlay? And then you're neutrally reweighting with a very respected third party who is known for the standard in measuring democracy. So we called the Economist, negotiated a license, and formed our company. And fast forward, our fund launched at the end of March, the Democracy International Fund, ticker DMCY on the New York Stock Exchange.
What did you have to do to form it, and how did the business model change from a year ago, to the realities of actually launching it? You are an entrepreneur in this regard.
So my very first job out of the Navy was at SEI. I was in their junior military recruit program. And so my first role out of the military was sales and marketing for mutual funds. And SEI back is just like the leader in mutual funds way back when. And now they're doing, fast forward, they are now doing the same thing for ETFs. So we talked to several vendors, but SEI was a very strong partner. We have 2 relationship managers that are former Navy. So working with that team, we were able to launch our fund using them as our distributor, and they brought in our fund counsel, as well as referred us to our sub-advisor, which is also a woman-owned business in Atlanta, Georgia. So we put together strategic partnerships for sub-advisory, also for outsourced compliance, which is really important in this very highly regulated industry. We talked to, I don't know, I think one of the hardest things was actually getting our underlying index, which we are using a partner out of Germany called Solactive. Solactive competes with MSCI and FTSE, and MSCI and FTSE are kind of more known for their indices, but they're also more expensive, honestly. And we didn't want to take on that extra cost that would flow through to our investors. So we're using a super inexpensive and nimble player out of Germany, and we have the same very similar basket of stocks to the MSCI and FTSE All World ex-US Index. So at the end of the day, you're getting the same diversification, the same volatility, and pretty much the same returns as those other products. And since we've launched, we've actually performed quite nicely compared to those competitive products.
Yeah, I think the biggest change though, really since last year we were making the product and putting the pieces together, the licenses, everything else so we could launch. The product is now solid. We have a good product. Now we have to sell it, right? We have to scale it, and we got to do because this is the sort of product where the pressure we put on authoritarians is proportional to assets under management. And so we've pivoted to that role of growth so that we can apply that sort of pressure.
And now a word about a VeteranCrowd Spotlight sponsor. The Severn River Leadership Group is a veteran-owned small business committed to the development and success of military veterans, first responders, elite athletes, and our community. We invest in each with our time, talent, and treasure through small business investing, coaching, and consulting. Leadership can be a very lonely place because of all of the responsibility and accountability involved and the decisions that need to be made. In today's world, small business owners and entrepreneurs need a trusted advisor in their corner to have real conversations about real life and business stuff. That's what the Severn River Leadership Group provides: personal leadership and team coaching for small business owners and entrepreneurs focused on emotional intelligence, personal and team resilience, decision-making, and team effectiveness. If you are a veteran, first responder, or elite athlete small business owner looking for a trusted advisor to help you get to the next level, connect with us online at www.severnriverleadershipgroup.com.
Hey, you're listening to the Spotlight on the VeteranCrowd Network. Our guests are Julie Cane and Rick Rikoski of Democracy Investments. Hey, I want to shift gears on you guys a little bit and plow into your backgrounds. And Rick, I'm going to start with you. And an interesting part of your career, you were a marine roboticist. What does that mean? You worked at the Naval Surface Warfare Center.
So I actually still am a marine roboticist. So in addition to Democracy Investments, I'm the CEO of Hadal, which makes underwater robots. But yeah, I basically back in the 90s, I was like, what do I want to do with my life? Kind of came to the conclusion I should make underwater robots. And it was a non-existent field. I went to grad school. I got the world's first PhD in marine robotics. I came out of there during a hiring freeze. So I almost went to work for the Naval Undersea Warfare Center in Newport, Rhode Island, but they had a hiring freeze on. They couldn't hire me, but Panama City actually lobbied to open up one last slot. And so that's how I ended up at the Surface Warfare Center rather than the Undersea Warfare Center. But what people don't realize is the Surface Warfare Centers actually own mine warfare. They own the VSW, very shallow water, all the way up to the beach. In Panama City is classically the Navy's Center of Excellence for Mine Warfare. Julius Hageman was brought over during Operation Paperclip. much as Werner von Braun was brought over and sent to Huntsville to work on rockets. The original side scan work was done in Panama City, the original synthetic aperture sonar work, all of that stuff. So I was down there and we were working on, mine detection algorithms, autonomous mine neutralization. So SEALs don't have to go in and do that, which is kind of a lousy job. And then, some of the IED work rolled through there during the Gulf War, the War on Terror. And it's just classically, it's a proxy for the Persian Gulf, the Mekong Delta, and the South China Sea. So definitely a really interesting place to be. A lot of cool things to see. That lab develops the hovercrafts, like the big old H-53s. You ever see those beasts towing equipment through minefields? Like literally, if you can't drive a boat through a minefield, you can fly a helicopter over it, tow stuff through there. Like they do crazy things like that. Like massive acres of land with everything made out of wood with bronze, so it's non-magnetic, so they can do experiments detecting mines magnetically or what. I mean, it's really a lot of weird stuff. It's like the Area 51 of mine warfare. So I did that, and then eventually spun out a company to make underwater robots, and that's what I'm doing now. So it's always an adventure. It's always a lot of fun. The ocean is pretty unexpected half the time.
That sounds like an entirely separate episode. We might have to have an underwater robot podcast discussion. Hey, Julie, I want to take you back. How did you wind up becoming a naval aviator?
Well, I grew up sailing on the East Coast and became aware of the Naval Academy sailing team. So I actually wanted to go to the academy, but I couldn't figure out how to get in. So I ended up going to UVA, and I could still sail with the Naval Academy during my midshipman summers. So that's how I got in there. And then once I was in ROTC, the most exciting thing I could do at the time as a woman and get the full warfare specialty was flying helicopters. If I'd flown props or jets, I would have been an instructor. Of course, those laws changed, and my roommate got to go and deploy flying jets, but for me at the time, wanting to get the same training, get the same excitement, that was the best option.
You mentioned in the lightning round auto rotation. Is there a particular incident that pops into your mind? I mean, were you flying equipment that some of the equipment in the fleet is older equipment? I'm curious what happened.
Yeah, I was pretty much all the aircraft I flew, I think, were older than me at the time. So I was stationed at QB Point in the Philippines, and it was a really hot day, and I was taking a crew of Navy SEALs up to practice jumping, and we weren't quite high enough when we had a compressor stall for them to jump out, and they wanted to jump out after they heard the compressor stall.
Yeah.
But we didn't let them, and as the junior pilot, I got to land the emergency landing. I got to fly the whole thing, and the senior pilot read the procedures. So I would auto rotated back to QB Point with those guys just itching to get out as soon as they could.
A helicopter is actually safer in an emergency with auto rotation than fixed wing aircraft, right?
It depends on the situation. Yeah,
depends on the situation.
Yeah,
you don't want to do that one again. Okay.
No, actually, I felt like I could do it in my sleep. I was so well trained. It's the best flight training in the world. And I remember like a surge of adrenaline, like, oh man, I've done this 1,000 times. Now I get to do it for real. And it was, I was not, I would do it again. It was, and I mean, luckily we were close to the base, et cetera. Didn't have to land on the water, but yeah, those are fun times.
Wow. That's really interesting stuff. So Julie, what do you think, and Rick, what do the next 12 months hold for democracy investments? I want to sort of map out the future here. What are you guys focused upon? What are the priorities?
Well, as Rick mentioned earlier, we need to raise assets in the fund to scale. As soon as we get to about 50 million, we'll be able to be on different platforms, both institutions and wirehouses. They can't really invest in a small fund out the gate. They need to see, stable AUM, so that our near-term goal is get to 50 million. And then once we get to about 150, 200, we can breathe and really get aggressive with our marketing strategies and get the word out and get people out of our competitors' products, which are passively investing in authoritarians, and get them into a product where they can get this, say, like I said, same returns, and you are supporting democracy in democratic countries.
How do you examine your existing investments and kind of score, your investments? I'm probably unwittingly supporting, communist China right now in my personal portfolio.
So if you told me the funds, I could probably figure it out for you if you gave me a few hours.
Right.
The short answer is you go through and you can just look at the country breakdown. That'll tell you what's going on. And then if you really want to calculate a composite democracy score for a portfolio, you literally can do that. You just take the proportions of the, for each country, multiply it times the democracy scores, add it up. Most of the world is following the MSCI and the FTSE stock indexes, right? And so they have significantly increased their holdings in authoritarian states over the last decade or so. And if you look at the democracy scores of those portfolios, they've been going down very fast. And, in another 5 years, maybe 10, there's a real chance that the average dollar you have invested is going to be invested in what we call a hybrid regime, also known as competitive authoritarian states, countries where they have elections, but the elections are not exactly contested. The leaders have their thumbs on the scale. It's very hard for them to lose. Classically, the democracies have had the strongest economies, but unfortunately, the authoritarian states have figured out the equation. They figured out how, or the recipe, they figured out how to grow their economies and hold on to power. And that is a threat that we're facing. The 20th century was really, democracy versus fascism and communism. And the 21st century is more complicated.
Really a hybrid approach to it. And you mentioned the Chinese. So last question here. If you were standing up and giving a presentation, and talking about, the mission, if you will, for this company, it really is to influence democracies in a positive way. Is that right, Julie?
Yes, and to incentivize democracy in authoritarian countries, and to let investors have a part in that.
And are you making some progress? Do you see, when do you think you'll really be able to throw your weight around? Let me ask the question that way.
Like I said, when we get, with the throw a weight around, we need to get to 1 billion. That's when it'll be very exciting. But in the short term, it's finding the like-minded, we call it the coalition of the willing, people that want to get in early and be a part of this movement as we grow awareness on the dangers of passive investing.
Yeah, I'm probably complicit in this without even knowing it.
Exactly.
How do folks learn more about democracy investments?
You can visit our website at www.democracyinvestments.com. You can also put our ticker symbol DMCY in your favorite brokerage platform, and you can also call SEI for our prospectus. All that information is on our website.
I need to give the standard disclaimer at this point. This is not a solicitation to buy or sell securities. However, we did want to learn about democracy investments and your higher mission. So thank you very much for joining the program today. Julie Cane, CEO of Democracy Investments, former Naval Aviator, a good Wahoo, University of Virginia graduate, Rick Rikoski, Chief Economist of Democracy Investments, and a marine roboticist. Rick, I'm going to get you back. We're going to have some kind of a discussion around underwater robots, because I'm going to be fascinated to follow that. But thank you for stepping into the spotlight and being on the program.
Thanks for having us, Bob. It's a pleasure.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Hey, you've been listening to the Spotlight on the Veteran Crowd Network. We're bringing veterans who are making a difference in our community. Many thanks today to Democracy Investments for what you guys are doing, for stepping into the spotlight. Julie, I'll throw out an Army Bravo Zulu to you and Rick and the Democracy Investment teams, folks, and that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to Spotlight by VeteranCrowd. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and uploads, please visit our website at VeteranCrowdNetwork.com. We'll see you next time.